And Kamala Harris won, I would say it's time for you to come to the land of milk and honey, and come to the land where you're allowed to speak and speak your mind without being targeted by the government. But unfortunately,
You're allowed to speak your mind without getting targeted by the government?
not anymore. Not anymore here. But that was something you could have done in America in the year, I don't know, 2021.
I'm Cameron Kasky.
I'm Tim Miller, and this is FY Pod. And we're talking about Zoomers and on this pod and Zoomers viewing the news. And we've decided to go global. Not only is this a manosphere podcast, but it's now a global podcast. Cam is is that a Carmelo Anthony jersey? Whose next jersey is that you want?
I didn't look at whose name
Let's turn around. Let's see it. Let's see who it is. Allen Houston. Oh, Julius Randle. He's on the Timberwolves now, but it's still nice. You're in a Knicks jersey. And so we're doing basketball. We're doing fishing. We're doing mass porn. What else are boys into? We're doing masculine stuff. And we're also going global by bringing in Drew Pavlou. Does your name rhyme?
Yeah, it does rhyme.
Drew Pavlou, who's Australian, our second straight male with an accent. You are straight, right?
The straightest bloke in history, of course, yes.
Okay, so it's our second straight bloke with an accent in a row. This is the fucking manosphere.
Yeah,
I was about to say.
Good stuff.
Not only that, Drew, you are our second guest from the British Commonwealth, and you answer to the old king.
Yes, we are a constitutional monarchy here in Australia. We just had an election, it was very similar to the Canadian election. The Conservative leader lost his seat, and the sort of left-wing minor party, like our equivalent of the NDP, the Greens, that leader lost his seat as well. And it was a huge victory for this sort of like center-left, moderate-left forces. Very interesting.
I want to learn more about you, but we should just start here with the Aussie election since you got us there. But really quick, that's a kind of a gay dog you're holding. Oh. It's not a very masculine animal.
No. It's a girl. It's a girl. It's a Labradoodle called Belle. She's a very beautiful creature, and she just sits on me while I do my podcast and my streaming. So, but I think there is a inherent masculinity in having a creature. I mean, Winston Churchill was a big fan of dogs. And we'll make it a straight bloke thing, of course.
Yeah, Cameron, is Winston Churchill your model of masculinity, Cameron? When you think of like a guy,
I don't know. I guess I'm not a real man until I have a creature sitting in my lap, like I'm a Bond villain.
Yeah, great way to put it. Of course.
So, Drew, actually, we'll come back to the Aussie election. We're not going to get off course here. We'll come back to that because it was a big win for the anti-Trump forces globally. Those of all of us. We have a pope now too. We'll get to that. But so we need to learn about you. The listeners need to learn about you. You came into my frame of view when you started yelling in your blimey accent at Tucker Carlson at an event in Australia. Yeah. And I was like, wow, who is this bloke yelling at Tucker Carlson, calling him the C word to his face? And I was like, I need to follow that person on social media. So that's how it started. But I know nothing about your life before that. So just like kind of tell us something like from baby Drew all the way to yelling at Tucker Carlson. How did you get there?
Wow. Great question. No, that's very funny. I love the fact that you saw my crazy protest against Tucker Carlson. I got $1,000 fine for that one, but it was very much worth it.
Because you don't live in a free speech country, or why were you fined?
Yeah, look, it is a lot tougher in Australia. Like I have a $30,000 fine from the local authorities for once holding a blank sign outside the Chinese consulate in my city. So, like, it can be pretty tough with free speech in Australia. I'll try to give you, it's nuts. I'll give you a bit of my backstory. I went to, I grew up in Australia. My family, just sort of like small shopkeepers, Greek Australian. We're Greek Australian by, I was the son of a Greek fruit shop owner, basically. And, no sort of like, no grand dynasty in my family history. I've just always been really obsessed with politics and history and stuff since I was a kid. When I went to university, I became really interested in foreign affairs, and I was reading about what was happening to the Uyghur people of Xinjiang, the Muslim minority group that was persecuted.
What year would this have been that you're in university?
2019. I'm still in university, but it's a long story, and I'll try to explain it very quickly. But I was interested in what was happening to the Uyghur people. The Muslim minority group, over 1 million, have been rounded up by the Chinese government in concentration camps, modern day concentration camps. I became interested in the Tibet issue, and also this was around the time that the Hong Kong movement was blasting up, and it was real. That was something really powered by like sort of like Gen Z, like really young people watching people that were like my age fight in the streets against the Hong Kong police for democracy, getting brutally cracked down on by this communist-backed regime. That really lit a fire in me, and I wanted to organize a sort of solidarity protest at my university. You might not be aware of this, but Australia has a really close economic relationship with China, where it is by far our largest trading partner. And a massive amount of Australian jobs and GDP relies upon exports to China. So at this time, it was really not something that many people in Australia wanted to talk about, the human rights abuses that were taking place in China. And also, the university system was very, very much dependent on sort of like Chinese international students. So, for example, at my university, the University of Queensland, it was 20% of the university budget, $300 million a year over a long-term period. That's, a $1 billion relationship. And as part of that, like the university president, vice chancellor, they would often travel to China. You might have heard of Confucius Institutes. These are the Chinese government-backed courses that exist in universities across the world. People try and present them as a kind of like Alliance Francois type thing, but really they are backed completely by the Chinese government. They have like kind of like no academic independence. They frequently teach a line on Chinese history and politics that is only acceptable to the Chinese Communist Party. And my university had a Confucius Institute, and the president of the university, a bloke named Peter Hui, he was on the board of Hanban, the Chinese government organization that ran Confucius Institutes worldwide. He even received a medal from the Chinese government for his advocacy of Confucius Institutes.
So they didn't like your protest none too much, I take it.
So to cut a long story short, I organized a small rally. It was the first protest I'd ever done, really, with like 20 of my mates. And it was crazy response. It was a crazy response. There was a video of my dad the night before screaming at me, "Keep a low fucking profile," blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm going to keep going. And the next day I was in the Washington Post and the BBC, and it was like the first time I'd ever been in the news or anything. Like I was a completely anonymous bloke. And then suddenly there were posts on Chinese social media with my name on it and photo which had tens of millions of views. Basically what happened was about 300 pro-China nationalist students came out and tried to beat me up. I got punched in the back of the head a couple times. It was a pretty crazy protest. And it was funny, the 2 or 3 guys who particularly like punched on with me and tried to bash me up, they were like in their 30s, weren't even students. They were like big hulking guys with backpacks and earpieces and sunglasses. Like it was really suspicious. The Chinese consul general in my city, his name was Zhu Jie, and he was an honorary professor at my university. They'd given him an honorary doctorate. And he put out a statement endorsing the violence, saying it was patriotic, the guys who had opposed me. And that was when I became an enemy of the Chinese government, and suddenly I had all these death threats across social media, thousands.
It was just you and 20 blokes, and you became an enemy of the Chinese government?
I know, it's
Cam had a protest. He organized a protest that had like 2 million people at it.
Yeah, that's a very generous count. But
the Chinese aren't on. Are you on the Chinese radar, Cam?
I have been posting clips from the show on TikTok because apparently you're supposed to do that. And my TikToks were only getting like a couple thousand views. It was really nothing extremely explosive. And then I posted these 2 TikTok videos where I was explaining how China was going to win the trade war with the United States. And suddenly, when I was saying this stuff about how China's got a leg up on us, my TikToks start getting all these views. And I was like, I wonder if our friends at the CCP are liking what I'm saying just a little bit too much. But, also we have Trump to blame for China's leg up on us. So my question for you, Drew, is I'm hearing all this stuff. Yeah. You are the son of fruit salesman. I know absolutely nothing else about your life except for that. Yeah. You went right into the Chinese Communist Party thing. And I'm just like, okay, I'm no fan of the CCP. I have a problem with Muslims being persecuted everywhere in this planet. A lot of people who are upset about what's happening to the Uyghurs don't seem as upset about what's happening to the Muslims in Gaza, but that's a different story. Yeah. My question is you're growing up, you've got the Queen, of course, RIP legend.
Good
lady. Where did communism touch you?
Oh, look. Well, this is the funny thing. I never really set out to be an anti-communist activist or an anti-China activist, anti-CCP activist, right? Never even in a million years. I just was feeling, it was when the Hong Kong protests were starting off. A funny fact of, funny coincidence is my birthday is June 4, 1999. So I was born 10 years to the day of Tiananmen. So like it was around the 30th anniversary of Tiananmen when I was turning.
You're familiar with the date of Tiananmen Square, right, Cam? If we just asked you to kind of name the date, June 4, 1989, you had that.
I'm focused. You know what? The United States government is brutalizing our people protesting it so much that it's hard to keep up with when it's happening in China. But of course, I know the famous image, and of course, I know that dissent in China is probably not going to be as complimented.
Well, they murdered they murdered hundreds of people, and it was my 20th birthday. It was the 30th anniversary of Tiananmen. I remember there were guys at my university who were trying to say it never happened and stuff like that. And so it was just like a confluence of events. It was really just chance that I was really passionate about that issue at one time. I thought I was just going to do one rally and never think about it again. Or not never think about it again, but just never really, I never set out to be an activist. It was after that they tried to expel me from the university. So the Chinese government put out articles through their state media saying the Chinese students of the university demand this guy be expelled. Otherwise, and they were implicitly sort of threatening the revenue stream, threatening that they would block Chinese students going to my university. And the university then brought in two of Australia's top 4 law firms, and they spent like up to probably $500,000 in Australian taxpayer money investigating me and trying to expel me from the university. So that's my backstory. And
that is insane.
Yeah.
Drew, I would say if it had Kamala Harris won, I would say it's time for you to come to the land of milk and honey and, come to the land where you're allowed to speak and speak your mind without being targeted by the government. But unfortunately,
you're allowed to speak your mind without getting targeted by the government?
Not anymore. Not anymore here, but that was something you could have done in America in the year, 2021. Was the Joe Biden government targeting anybody for their speech, Cameron, that you were worried about?
Are we talking about the Joe Biden government or the feds while Joe Biden was in the government? Because I do have a feeling that people who are speaking out against the government were being closely monitored by our pretty intense anti-terror investigators.
I mean, I don't think anybody got fined for carrying a blank sign.
Yeah.
I mean, the blank sign thing is it would be farcically comedic if it wasn't true. But my question for you is, why were you carrying a blank sign?
Oh, so I was campaigning for election. I ran as a small sort of independent ticket in 2022. I was 22 years old. I was I was one of the youngest.
For what, for the House of Dingoes, or what was?
Yeah,
what was the office you were running for?
I ran for the Australian Senate, and I didn't do too well, but as part of that, I had a campaign about the Chinese government trying to raise awareness in Australia about, the human rights abuses, etc. And I held a blank sign. On one side of it, it said nothing happened June 4, 1989. And then I flipped it over for it to be blank, and a sort of satirical representation of the fact that there's a lot of censorship when it comes to Chinese human rights abuses. And $30,000 fine. And look, the sad thing is that it didn't really stop there. I had a Uyghur friend. My email got hacked in 2021 by an IP address in Hong Kong. I had a Uyghur friend in Australia that I was talking to a lot about what was happening. His mum got taken after my emails were hacked because I had taken down his story and talked to people at Human Rights Watch about his story. And obviously there were identifying details about his life. His mum got taken for 6 months.
Okay.
That was really horrific. And then
you made the Uyghur friend after you did start protesting, or you already had a Uyghur friend?
Yeah, no. I mean, I met him at that first step of a protest, and we talked about his life story. I wrote down a short thing about his life story, and I was helping Human Rights Watch in Australia compile kind of evidence about Australians who were from a background, they had family back home under the Chinese government, and they were facing persecution still. So he had shown me, for example, I've still got this video. There was a Chinese police officer who FaceTimed him one time while he was in Australia, working one time. They had his mum next to him in the police station. Basically, they said, give us over your car registration details, give us your address.
Where was this happening?
He was living in Australia, my Uyghur friend, and the FaceTime call was from a Chinese police officer in Xinjiang with his mum next to him in the police station. And they were saying, give us where your children go to school in Australia. So, I had a lot of Tibetan friends and Hong Konger friends as well who'd faced, that type of harassment in Australia too. So I was compiling these sort of records, and I was working with Human Rights Watch in Australia about this stuff, transnational repression, they call it. And then, because my emails were hacked, his mum was taken without any explanation for six to 9 months, something like that. And then afterwards, it got even crazier. They started a bomb threat campaign against me. My brother plays college soccer in America, in New York. They did a bomb threat in his name. They created a fake email address in my brother's name and sent it off to LAX saying that they were going to bomb the airport 3 FBI agents visited my brother in New York City at his college soccer dorm. They did it to my mum. There were, a series of bomb threats in my mum's name. Essentially what they would do is they'd just create proton mails, which hide the IP address. And then they would do these fraudulent bomb threats in the name of me and my family members. And I was in London. I was once protesting outside the Chinese embassy in London, and the London Metropolitan Police pulled up, and they were armed, and they put me in the back of a paddy wagon, put me in a rear stack handcuff position, treated me like a terror suspect. I was held incommunicado for 24 hours without the ability to talk to a lawyer or the Australian embassy, because the Chinese embassy had said, this guy did a bomb threat. And eventually the police showed it to me in the morning at like 4 a.m. And it was, "Hi, this is Drew. Today I'll bomb the embassy at 12. Regards, Drew." And based off that,
that's just how that's how people usually talk.
That's how bomb threats are usually.
It was nice of them to at least suggest that you had the decorum to offer regards.
Yeah, exactly. So look, unfortunately, I've had a pretty bad history with all that. The funny thing is, and I was going to mention this before, because I came out so strongly against the Chinese Communist Party, a lot of like MAGA people tried to rally around me. So I remember when I was getting expelled from the University of Queensland, which is the university that was trying to pressure me.
Tell me Bannon called you.
No, not Bannon, but Jack Posobiec. I remember.
My fucking
Pizzagate
God.
Jack called you.
Yeah, so he shared my story, and I literally just replied, "Fuck off, I hate you," and he deleted it. So look,
we found a new Cameron replacement. Sorry, Cameron. I've got to throw up my leg right now. He's an anti-communist. He's shit-talking Pizzagate Jack.
You just have a preponderance of new cams. I don't know how you're going to keep up. You should keep these new cams at Astro Pizza. And
it wasn't Astro Pizza. What was the place in the basement?
The basement, yeah.
What was the pizza place called in DC with the basement? Comet.
Astro
Comet Ping Pong.
Same outer space theme. I heard a story once of my friend who was at a very, very prestigious university in a master's program where there was one kid who was either Uyghur or had family members who were Uyghurs living in China. And then there was another kid who was from China who was very aligned with the CCP and their agenda. And during a heated argument in class, the CCP aligned student said, "I'm going to have my family call the government and make some reports about your family." And I was like,
this stuff happens. Like I've had even just like, so when we did that first protest, like there were 2-3 guys from China who came to our protest who were like pro-democracy guys. All of them had their family members visited by state security police in China within 2-3 days of that protest. That one of them, so all of them visited by state security. And I've had a lot of students at my university from China who were like, I once got coffee with this Chinese student, and he was like, let's make sure we try find a spot on campus where no one will see us. He was really worried that someone would report him. And, he basically said, I know about Tiananmen. I think what you're doing is really cool. But, I wish I could support, but there's a lot of pressure. So it happens, right? And look, that's the funny thing. That was my background. I was always sort of like an anti-MAGA guy from the start. Because, look, my whole thing has always been anti-authoritarianism. And, Trump is authoritarian. And I didn't coin the term, but I guess I sort of helped to popularize the whole MAGA Maoism thing recently. Where just
tell people. Let's tell people about MAGA Maoism. Actually, before we do that, just really quick, I'm gonna look in the camera. Eat shit, China. You fucking suck. You're the fucking worst.
Chinese Communist Party. We like to say the Communist Party, not China.
I don't know. Broadly speaking, and Sebastian, please put that on TikTok. Okay.
Wait. Do me a favor. Sorry, I'm gonna hop in real quick. Just because I'm interested in being safe and comfortable and prospering, and I already have some things to say about Israel, which is going to have some eyes on me. I would just like to say, President Xi, if I could spend my entire life walking that belt road, I would. I hope you acquire not only soft but hard power. And I just want to let you know that I've seen pictures of your country and it looks very beautiful. And those ghost cities that you guys build that nobody ends up living in, it just looks like a fucking haunted, dead place. I want to raise my family and have unfortunately only one child there.
They've lifted that now. They've lifted that now, actually.
Okay, I want to have a preponderance of white, Jewish, Chinese-born children there, and you're just seeing. So I don't associate with Tim Miller, and Wu Jiao Kumai Long.
That is the tiniest micro hard power you've ever seen coming out of Chairman Xi.
I can count I can count to 10. 1 2 3 4 Wu Liu Qi Ba Zhou Shi.
Pretty good.
How do you say tiny cock in Chinese? You got that?
We'll get back to you on our Monday evening episode about that. Anyway,
all right, Drew. You were talking about how you kind of have helped popularize something, and I've stolen it from you actually. So you're inspiring me already.
That's good. That's good.
This notion that Trump has a Maoist worldview. I don't really understand it. I'm gonna have to admit, but it sounds fun, and so I've been saying it. But explain what's behind that.
So, look, MAGA Maoism, we just call attention to the fact that there's a really scary and alarming cult of personality around Trump, where, he has these cabinet meetings and everybody has to literally go around and praise dear leader and, thank him for, his God-given talents and what he's contributed to the world. And, it's just pointing out a number of really disturbing facts, the extreme cult of personality, the instinct towards hyper authoritarianism, and also as well, and this is a really interesting and funny new part to it, and I think this is probably the part that helped MAGA Maoism become more popular as a concept, the kind of cult of sacrifice that is now propped up around Trump, where in light of the tariffs, that you now have his surrogates and his influencers going out going, you must accept poverty, you must accept sacrifice, you must accept a lower living standard, you must work in the factories, you must mine the tin, like all these people who they voted for Trump because they're grocery prices were too high. All of a sudden they're saying money isn't important. And we literally had Benny Johnson, one of the top MAGA influencers, and this was
very straight, by the way. Definitely not gay. It was just
heterosexual king Benny Johnson.
Googling gay cruises. Nothing, not just as many heterosexual men do. Sorry, continue. What was he saying?
That was the guy who what was it? He had an advertisement for gay cruises and he posted going "This is disgusting. Google's work." And it's it's based on your search history, man. So
can we take a step? Can we take? Oh, sorry, you were saying something
finish your
about
point
Benny
about
Johnson.
MAGA Maoism, then we'll get
back. Look, Benny Johnson came out and he literally had a post where he was like, money doesn't mean everything. You will learn more and you will, you will have a better quality of life if you learn to reject material goods. And so this is the Maoist parts of MAGA Maoism, the love of chaos, the cult of sacrifice around the leader, the idea
taking over the universities, the Cultural Revolution part.
Absolutely. Trying to purge the universities, trying to purge, intellectuals. And then, just this strange new element of Trumpism where they're literally saying, if Trumpism crashes the economy, you have to accept that because it's in our political interest. It's in the political interest of Trump and of the leader. So this is the kind of MAGA Maoist mentality. And I call it kind of a third world mentality as well. One of the funny things is Trump really seems to hate the West. And when the way he talks about America, it's a funny thing, but he sounds like a decolonial sort of academic. He talks about it as, he literally uses the words, America has been raped. The world has pillaged and raped America. He talks like he's kind of like a global South, leftist, Leninist kind of anti-imperialist leader. So these are all the weird elements that have come into it. And the fact that he really seems to hate modern Western liberalism, which is, hating the basic standards of governance and, the rule of law, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, all these things that really define modern Western states and help us not to be basket cases. That's the difference between, a failing state and a pretty prosperous, well-developed country, the rule of law, a fair legal system, all these types of things. And they're just trying to purge all that and try to destroy all that. And it really seems like a lot of them have actually said that. I remember Nick Fuentes said he would rather have a lower GDP. He'd rather have a poorer country than live next to Indians. A lot of these guys just outright say that, right? So,
Cameron, where were you? You were trying to chime in on something?
Well, I want to go back and do a little history lesson in one sec, but real quick beforehand, you're talking about leftists, and that brings to mind just this thing that goes on, I'm sure across the West, but I'm just, I'm a very Americo-centric commentator. This thing that happens here in the red, white, and blue, the extremely successful and going to be successful for a long time country of America.
Hell yeah.
People like to use the word leftist to describe shit that is just straight up not leftism. They like to use the word leftist to describe somebody who's progressive in really any way, someone who has some values that might be closer to democratic socialism and stuff like that. And I guess my question for you is, while you've got people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who talks about wealth redistribution and things like that, being branded as a leftist, and then you've got leftists who are way closer to full-blown communism.
Tankies.
Where do you draw the line? What is a leftist to you, and how do you think people should talk about progressive politicians in the United States? Because from what I understand, what we consider left wing in the United States is actually way more moderate in other developed countries.
Well, funny fact, right? Like in Australia, both the centre left and the centre right parties support universal public healthcare. Like our conservative politicians in Australia support universal public healthcare, and that's not even on the agenda, right? Like no one would even touch that. Even the most right-wing people in Australian politics, I don't think I've seen a single person say abolish public healthcare in favour of a fully privatized system. So yeah, obviously America has its own kind of like political spectrum, which is strange. I'm very lucky I grew up in a country with universal public healthcare. I think it's good. So look, my views might be strange to somebody in America. I mean, I'm an anti-communist who supports universal public healthcare. I'm somebody who, obviously you have to draw a distinction between somebody like Bernie Sanders. And I actually think Bernie Sanders is probably more of like a social democrat figure. I mean, he called himself a democratic socialist, I think, for branding. I think in reality, he's more of a social democrat figure. If you compare him to, say, like Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie's foreign policy takes are infinitely better than Jeremy Corbyn. I think that's the division, right? Like there are people on the left who we would call tankies. And that's a pejorative term that comes back to, it goes all the way back to the 1956 Hungarian uprising when the Soviets sent in tanks to crush the Hungarians. And basically in the left, in the Western left, like the communists who supported the Soviets crushing the protesters, they became pejoratively termed tankies. And it's really something from Britain, I think. But it's a really good term to use. I think that's the distinction, right? Like I've got no problem with AOC's most of AOC's economic views. I don't really have too much of a problem with them, right? And honestly, most of her foreign policy takes are fine. I saw her the other day. Unfortunately, she voted with like MTG and Laura Boebert on this policy that would oppose sanctioning the regime in Georgia, which is like a pro-Russian dictatorship essentially at this point. I thought that was sad because maybe that's just someone in an office hasn't given her the right briefing or whatever. I think this whole squad voted on that as a block to like vote against sanctions on this state in Georgia, which is essentially a pro-Kremlin dictatorship at this point. I thought that was really bad. They were voting alongside MTG, always a really bad sign. Sometimes AOC, I think, does.
You might want to double check. Anytime you're checking the same box as MTG, you might just want to take a quick look at the fine print.
Except for those things where the far right and the, in our country, quote, far left are getting along, like when they're talking about banning congressional stock trading and stuff.
Yeah, like, sure. Well, I mean, that's like one issue. That's okay, I think. I mean, that's also crazy to me as an Australian that you guys have that. Because I think in Australia, every single MP basically has to file full-on public interest disclosure. Everybody knows exactly what their assets are, etc. I don't know. Maybe you guys have that already. But yeah, look, like I think AOC, most of her foreign policy views are fine. Some of them I would still have some of them I'd still criticize. Like I think it was silly when she I thought it was a bit silly when she made a big show and dance of she did vote for it, but she cried when she voted for the Dome, which is I guess a defensive weapon system in Israel that defends civilians.
Oh God! Okay, we're skipping through this. I don't want to hear Cameron talk about Bibi again.
Yeah,
Okay, let's we're with you on AOC.
I haven't talked about Bibi in weeks.
Look, I don't like Bibi. I don't like Bibi. But look, I was going to say, I think AOC is obvious. Overall, she's not that bad, especially if you compare her to someone like Jeremy Corbyn, who literally went and met with Hamas, literally went and met with Hezbollah, has basically praised Putin, all these.
Did you see Trump called the Houthis brave?
I saw that. Yeah, very strange, very strange. So look, the funny thing is, it really is something on the extreme right and the extreme left, and I'm not saying I don't put AOC in the extreme left. I think extreme left is sort of the tankies. The far right and the tankies really seem to just hate America, and they really seem to hate Western countries. And, it's funny. You had that infamous quote by Trump where he was asked about Putin killing a dissident. He basically said, "Oh, what, you think we're so good? We've got killers too. Our country sucks as well." These guys really hate the idea that there are any moral ideals at all. And yeah, look, that's the thing. There's the tankies and the extreme right. They hate the West. They love to put shit on the West. They love to say our countries have fallen and are disgusting, morally disgusting. And I guess they've got a weird unity ticket on the Russia stuff because the far right guys love Russia because they project it as, oh, this hyper masculine state that's against the gays and really conservative and Christian. It's literally like a debauched, horrible hellhole, like with like massive.
The Russians are awful. I know. So I know that in previously you were quick to correct me and say that we criticize the CCP, not the Chinese, and that's fine. That is not. The Russian culture is horrible.
Oh, Russian culture.
You can
really
agree
bad.
with me on
Russia,
this, right? Putin is bad, but actually the entire Russian culture is pretty
really
horrible.
bad. And unfortunately, like that's because there's like majority support for Putinism in Russia. Yeah. That's the sad reality of it.
Didn't the guy who Putin killed
Navalny?
Didn't he come like kind of close, even with all the election meddling?
No, he was relatively popular. Like it's interesting. If there had been free and fair elections, it might have been different. Look, I don't necessarily go into the same thing, but some of the people in the pro-Ukraine crowd actually really hate Navalny, and they say, like, look, if he was in charge, they still would have invaded Ukraine. I don't necessarily hold to that view, but like they do point to like the fact that when he was much younger, he had like far-right views. He was really nationalistic and stuff like that. I personally think like he did change over time. He did oppose the war in Ukraine and stuff, but there are a lot of people who like are in the backyard of Russia and Eastern Europe who have had, histories where they've been oppressed by Russia for decades, centuries, and like they hated Navalny as well.
Long story short, there's no good Russians. Speaking of Russian sympathizers, do you want to tell us briefly about the Tucker encounter? I honestly don't really remember. I just remember you were yelling at him and waving a flag at him, and I followed you. That's my only memory.
That was one of my best ever protests. Basically, over the years, like I've always been like a protester, I guess. And when Ukraine happened, I was immediately really passionate about the cause. I knew that basically China was fully backing Russia in invading Ukraine. I saw it as very similar. I saw it literally as a unity ticket because China was preparing. China still is, unfortunately, under Xi, preparing to invade Taiwan. So I see it really as a unified issue. And Tucker was brought out by a far-right billionaire in Australia called Clive Palmer. It's very funny. The past 3 elections, he spent 350 million Australian dollars in inflation, probably with inflation, probably up to $500 million over the past 3 elections. He's won 1 seat. So like he's pretty hated in Australia, this guy.
I wish our far right billionaires were losers like that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny to be honest. And look, he brought Tucker Carlson out on his private jet to Australia, paid him probably an exorbitant fee to just host these lectures around Australia. And I found out he was coming to my city, Brisbane. And I hate the guy so much because of what he's done with pro-Russian sentiment, his propaganda. I think you can literally track when Tucker started talking shit about Ukraine and attacking Ukraine, and when MAGA and the Republicans started hating Ukraine. I think it like literally coincides perfectly. I think he's been probably one of the most influential people in making right-wingers in America hate Ukraine. And I saw he was coming to Brisbane. I was like, of course I'm going to that. I literally bought a ticket for $150. And then this was actually pretty cheeky of me. I mean, like the funny thing was, over the years, there've been conservatives who've liked what I've done because of, he's like sort of anti-communist. A lot of people don't like the Chinese government, etc. And this like young conservative, I think it was a member like the Young Liberals, which our liberals in America our liberals in Australia are the conservatives, which is a funny fact. But like this young liberal guy who must have known me from my protests, like he saw me then and was like, "Oh, dude, I love your stuff. Come sit with me in the front row with my dad." Like he had bought a ticket. They must have been rich. They bought a ticket. Nice guy. I've got nothing against him. I feel bad for him. I had snuck the Ukraine flag under my literally in my pants. And I just waited until like Tucker came out. It was really torturous because it literally took him like an hour and a half to come out. I don't even know why. And I just waited like 10 minutes for the speech. And I was already in the first row and I literally pulled the Ukraine flag out. And I was just like, "Stop licking Putin's ass." I just started screaming at him. And then he started going on a rant like, "This is awesome. I hate Ukraine. Fuck these guys." And he just like went on a big rant. And the police frog marched me out of there. I got a $1,000 fine, but it was worth it. And the really good thing, I'm good at organizing this shit. I made sure to buy 2 tickets because I got my friend in and I sent him on the opposite side of the place. And I was literally texting him. I was like, "I'm going to do it now." And I got him to film the whole thing. So it worked well. It was good stuff. It was good fun. And Tucker had like a whole minute of hate directed against me, mocking me and laughing as I got frog marched out of there and yelling like, "Oh, fuck Ukraine," basically. That was one of my best protests. I'm very glad I did that.
There's a lot of Americans who love Russia and who think that this Putin guy ain't so bad. A lot of these MAGA voters, I think a lot of MAGA voters don't actually like Russia that much. They just love the racism enough that they're just pretending to love Russia. But a lot of them seem to stan Russia at this point.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, because of course Russia's this communist country, so these people who hate communism are also loving Russia. How do China and Russia implement communism differently, and where do both of them diverge from what communism has actually set out to be in what is supposedly the good version?
Well, look, Russia isn't a communist state today, and they don't claim to be. They do have a cult of memory and propaganda around the Soviet times, and so it's really interesting. Like, I would actually say Putin is more transparent. Like, I'd say Putin is more straightforwardly a fascist guy. Like, it's all about basically, like, you know, cult of imperialism, cult of the leader. He refers to himself as a new Tsar. He brought back the imperial eagle. It's interesting, like, at the same time as the fact that, you know, at the same time that they are fascist and in official terms they hate the Soviet Union, they have basically revived this whole cult of Soviet nostalgia for Stalin. Putin has referred to Stalin as a strong leader, etc. There's I think there's polling in Russian society where like 60%, like a strong majority think Stalin was a great figure in their history. And they've had Russian troops in Ukraine while they're fighting under Soviet sickles, Soviet hammer and sickles, and Soviet flags and stuff like that, the Red Army flag. And it's weird because it's like a kind of weird toxic fusion of like Soviet nostalgia with modern day fascism. And there's
kind of like how I'm a cultural Catholic, you know? Like, I like to sing the songs at Christmas. I'm like a cultural Catholic. I don't like follow all the rules, you know? But shout out to the new Pope. They're kind of culturally communist, but they're not going for like the rules.
Well, I would say culturally, like, look, I'd say the tradition of autocracy and authoritarianism in Russia is unfortunately so strong. And when the war started, I started reading the books of Svetlana Alexeyevich, who's a Belarusian writer, and she won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And she basically has these oral histories of Soviet society and stuff like that. And when you read that, you're like, oh my God, it's so much deeper than just the leader. There is, like, unfortunately, a really long history of just like hardcore daily brutality and violence in Russian society. And it goes back decades. Like, some of this, she would interview, like in her books, she would interview guys who were like Soviet commissars who were like tortured themselves by the party. Like, during Stalin's purges, they would purge themselves and brutally tortured. And yet they still were like hardcore communists and still defended the whole overall Great Purges. Like, there's a really scary mentality there. And look, the strange thing is as well, people sometimes like to say that China today is not communist because obviously they have a very advanced, like semi-market economy. And a lot of people, especially a lot of left-wing theorists, like to call it state capitalism. Look, at the end of the day, it is a Marxist-Leninist system. The entire constitution of China, the entire Communist Party, it is modeled on Marxist-Leninism, the theory of, like, you know, Leninist vanguard politics, where, you know, you have the cadres and you have the you know, centralized discipline of the party, etc. When Xi first came to power, he circulated a now infamous document called Document Number 9, and essentially they were telling all the underlings that Western-style concepts like constitutionalism, democracy, all these things were to be regarded as basically ideological poisons that had to be purged from the system completely. It's interesting. There are also a lot of fascist elements to China today. I've argued for a long time that in reality, it has more maybe fascist undertones than communist, because look, like, is it really like a workers' paradise? Is it really like a worker state? I mean, they have the same sort of corporatist economic policies as fascism. You may know, like, fascists were all about, like, we must transcend class division by, you know, having the employers and the unions in the same corporate bodies and stuff like that. China's
the costumes are kind of the same as fascism too. They have costumes, you know.
I guess that's sort of what I was trying to get at, is, like, you know, I think of the people I know who are, I think pro-communist might be a dramatic way of putting it, but who support a lot of things that are at least considered communist.
Who've read a Marxist theory book.
They got like a pamphlet in college and it became their whole personality and they started tweeting. But I think the thing that they would say, you know, when you talk about, China under Mao Zedong and when you talk about the CCP and when you talk about Stalin, what they say is, sure, we call that communism, but that's not, but they diverged from what communism's actually about. That's not communism as it should be. We're advocates for communism, the good version. And I guess my question for you is, what is the good version?
I think that's cope. Like there's now the infamous saying online. People use it to mock the communists. They basically go, "Real communism has never been tried." These people, they will always, every single time communism has ever been implemented or tried, there's been mass atrocities associated with it. You know, massive amounts of death, massive amounts of horrific, hellish atrocities, and I think people on the extreme tanky left like to say, "Well, no true communism has never been tried." But I mean, you could there could be a Nazi who goes, "No, true fascism has never been tried," right? Like it's really a massive amount of code. And look, you know, the funny thing is, maybe one day we will have people say, "Real MAGA has never been tried. Real Trumpism has."
We're already going to see.
We're already we're sort of seeing that a little bit now. Like I've seen some Trump people go, like, "Well, you know, the way he implements it is bad, but the general spirit of the ethos is good." It's funny. Kevin Rudd, the Australian ambassador to China, he's the former prime minister here. Really cool guy, actually. He supported me. He put out a statement endorsing me, saying I shouldn't be expelled when the university was trying to expel me in Australia. He has written this book. Let me get it up, actually. It was on my bookshelf. He's written this really good book. I actually legitimately endorse it.
You do have like a big book schlong.
It's
you're just showing off all those books.
Yeah, no. I love my books. But on Xi Jinping, he wrote a PhD at Oxford on Xi Jinping thought. And what he does in that book, he just basically studies all of Xi Jinping's propaganda speeches. And he calls it Marxist nationalism. And I think that's a more polite way of saying national socialism. Essentially, his argument is that on economics, Xi has moved decisively to the left. He's constantly told the party cadres, we should not forget our communist roots. We should not forget our Marxist roots. We must go back to that. He obviously clamped down on the economy a lot. There was the purge of Jack Ma and stuff like that, which interestingly, he's brought him back into the fold now. But on economic policies, Xi has decisively moved China to the left and has tried to rein in the so-called excesses of the market in China and tried to place much more of a state role. They're a Communist Party, basically control units, Communist Party sort of control units that exist even in private market companies in China. So they basically existed as commissars to just watch over and make sure that people are following the correct political line. And that whole move to the left in the Chinese economy has been linked to, you know, a pretty significant downturn in China. I actually do think Cameron's right that overall they unfortunately do have more of a leg up on America when it comes to this trade war. I think that's probably correct. But there has been a lot of economic problems in China the past couple of years that have been associated with Xi Jinping's authoritarianism. And Kevin Rudd says he's moved to the left on economics, but on nationalism, he's moved hard to the right. And when he calls it Marxist nationalism, I think it's a more polite way of saying national socialism.
All right.
Yeah.
I've got two cultural questions for both of you. For the Zoomers, before we get to the boomer mailbag in the end of the show. The first cultural question is kind of related to Cameron's question. I'm trying to, and maybe it's different in Australia. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Like when you were first started talking, you were drawn to the Hong Kong protests. Yeah. So really we're a lot of young people. And we did see a lot of young people here in America and around the world on the Palestine protests. Yeah. But like politically speaking, it feels very different from when I was growing up as to like what are the en vogue ideologies. Like you see a lot of people drawn to like Charlie Kirk MAGAism, right? Yeah. And you see a lot of people drawn to like some version of like AOC all the way over to like the Luigi Mangione pamphlet people, right? Like and there's not a lot of Drews. Like where are the good freedom loving twinks? You know, where are the 25-year-old liberal values, libertarian, you know, but also I want health care for people. Like there's a big ideological center that's like not where why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
That is very true. And look, that's what I'm trying to get at in like all my sort of online advocacy and my Substack and YouTube and all this stuff. Like I'm trying really hard to fill that massive chasm, unfortunately, because you're right. Like when it comes to young people, unfortunately, the extremes really are quite dominant these days. It seems like that way to me. And look, I think
when I was at fucking college, people had that damn Shepherd Ferry Hope poster up. It was just regular old normie Obamaism. You know, it was like, we love the gays and we like brunch and multiculturalism.
The problem is the moderates in this country are in any other, Western country right wing. Like the reason that everything's getting so radical is because young people want what, Drew would consider the very moderate policy point of healthcare. And it's only the people farther and farther to the left who are advocating for something like that. It's people in the American center left aren't offering things that are so obviously popular like that.
Listen, I think it's two things. I think one part of it, and Cameron touched on this, and I think he is correct to an extent. I think a big part of it is unfortunately like material conditions, and not to go all too Marxist on everybody, but I think look, it is really hard because Cameron and me, our generation is, and this is something that's pretty common across the Western world. Like, you see this in the UK, you see this in Australia, you see this in Canada, you see this in America. Our generation in the English speaking world and the Western world, we seem to be like the first generation that has a really big prospect of going backwards massively economically. And especially in Australia and Canada and UK, it's probably less so of a problem in America, but I know there are still places in America where there's really bad problems with housing shortages and housing scarcity, like, for example, California and stuff like that. Like for example, in Australia, it's crazy. Like the average median house price in Australia in Sydney, for example, is $1.6 million. In American, that's probably $1 million American, 1.1 million maybe. And look, there've been studies like the average school leaver in Australia to save up just for a deposit on a house in Sydney, it will take them 46 years. In my city of Brisbane, it will take them 21 years. In the city of Melbourne, our second largest city, it will take them 21 years. We've got a terrible, terrible problem with housing shortages. And so just all this stuff combined, it means the economic prospects of my generation, the Gen Z, is way more limited than the older generation. I think the boomers were really pretty selfish. Like they had so much economic opportunity, and they've now, put in place policies like NIMBYism and made it so hard to build new housing, and just all these policies that really fuck over young people. So I think you're right, Cameron. A big part of it is the actual genuine economic conditions are making it much harder for sort of like just normal conservatives or centrist people to exist. Like in Australia, the Conservative Party just got smashed. And there have been conservatives who've come out and they've just literally said, well, what are young people supposed to conserve? Like they can't even get a home. They can't even get on the property ladder. If they can never get property. I mean, remember Margaret Thatcher, like her whole thing was she wanted to have a property owning democracy. I'm not necessarily endorsing Thatcher here. I think she did a lot of bad things too. But like, if you look just even in the 80s, like there was like a pretty widespread understanding by conservatives that people will only be conservative if they actually have a stake in the economy, if they actually have the ability to own their own homes and stuff like that. You don't have that in Australia or in a lot of these countries for Gen Z people. And there was a crazy stat the other day from the Australian elections. The Liberal Party has essentially been completely kicked out of every single capital city in Australia. We've basically got a really heavily urbanized population in Australia. I know it's funny because in America, a lot of people think we ride to school on kangaroos and all this stuff. But like 80% of Australians, like 90% of Australians, like
in the pouch.
Yeah, in the pouch, exactly. But we've basically got like 3-4 big cities, like, and basically everybody lives there. Like it's like Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne on the East Coast, plus Perth and Adelaide, Canberra. Like we've only got a couple cities, right? And people live in these cities, and it's really hard for people to get homes. And there was a stat the other day when the Liberals were basically destroyed from every major city. But 18%.
Wait, they're ejaculating in every city?
No. But
we've put a tariff on Aussie cow semen.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We're looking into it. One of the Republican congressmen here wants to put a tariff on Aussie cow semen.
Very smart.
There goes my weekly protein intake.
So true. We had a stat. The Liberals, our conservatives, in the major cities, among like non-boomers, they got like 18%. Like that was their vote count. So they've been basically like, imagine that, right? Imagine a scenario where the Republicans were getting 18% in America. It's like full death for that party, right? So a huge part of it is if people can't get on the property ladder, if people can't even have a stake in the society and the economy, they won't ever have the chance to be conservative. People think that young people magically become more conservative as they age. It doesn't actually happen like that. It's really a function of like they get a home, they get a mortgage, they have a family, they then want to conserve that.
My problem with this, Drew, I hear you. My problem with this is like the problem that you're laying out is calling for nice centrist liberal YIMBYism.
Yeah,
let's build houses in Canberra. That's what you're calling for. But instead, the youth are saying, no, what we need is to expel all the brown people. Right. Or what we really need is a communist society.
You're right. So I was going to get onto that into my second point. So I think the material conditions, the economic conditions are there. However, at the same time, it's also, unfortunately, we're in an age where TikTok, which is literally functionally controlled by like an enemy state to the West, and a lot of these social media platforms and Twitter is essentially controlled by somebody who is also hostile to the West, Elon Musk. Yeah. Like these platforms that are turbocharging like really hardcore ideological extremism for young people. And so it does seem to me, and even in Australia, it's a bit like this, like the stuff that goes really viral on social media for young people, it's either like extreme far right guys who are literally calling for a full white Australia, expelling all brown people. And then on the left, it's like people who are like full communists. They're praising Luigi Mangione for going out and killing someone.
Yeah.
Like,
we've checked both boxes now.
Yeah. And it's
BB and Luigi, baby. Friends of the show.
The poor Aborigines. Where are we going to send the Aborigines? Where are the Australian Nazis planning on sending the Aborigines? New Zealand?
That is a good question. And
Africa?
Well, no one knows. And I actually tried to find
out. Libya.
Like,
I think Libya is accepting new deportees, apparently.
It doesn't really work for them to have like a full expel these people thing when it's like people who've been in Australia for tens of thousands of years. But yeah, like it's pretty scary these days. And I think that's the thing, right? Like it's the economic conditions are terrible, and then people are getting their minds destroyed. They're just getting one-shotted on TikTok. Like they're just getting completely one-shotted. Remember last year when Osama bin Laden's letter to America went viral on TikTok?
Yes.
Like this is what's happening to young people. It's insane.
When I was in 5th grade, I did an assignment that was about everybody got a country, and I got Australia. So I'm very dangerous. I have a very strong 5th grade knowledge of Australia. Okay, my last question for you before moving our mailbag for both of you. Well, it's more of an announcement for Cameron, but it's a question. Cameron announced that he's going to Equinox now. He's trying to twunk up, and pretty soon he's going to be wearing that jersey without a shirt underneath it because as a content man, as an influencer, he's very mindful of the mogging and, what is needed to be successful. And I saw you on social media. You are also talking about how you're trying to get fit. So I'd like for you, both of you, to talk about the unfair expectations on male beauty among content creators.
It's actually so true. One thing that sucks? I hate Hassan Piker because he's like literally gone out there, fully embraced the Houthis, fully embraced Hamas, all this stuff. But it's really hard because like he does like mog people, unfortunately. And like, you would have seen that New York Times article recently that came out that was just like the progressive mind and the MAGA body. Like it's very hard, right? Like we have very unfair beauty expectations on the male influencers. And Cameron, I'm glad that you're going to Equinox. That sounds good. You should definitely twunk up. I've lost 15 kilos over the past year. I mean, I had all these communists and fascists equally calling me fat online. I gained a little bit of weight. They bullied me into submission. I fucking lost the weight, which is good. I'm going to try go to gym, get fit. It's very important. We can't cede the ground of aesthetics to the fascists because that gives them a big, powerful propaganda advantage, unfortunately.
Okay, couple things. Number one, the whole calling Hassan, who's a friend of mine, by the way, I love Hassan, the whole calling Hassan progressive mind in a MAGA body thing. MAGA people on average are fatter than, so I don't know where the fuck New York Times thought of that. But I was going to say, in terms of my exercise, first of all, it's definitely for the influencer purposes and for the twunking up, which for those of you in our audience who don't know what a twunk is, it's a twink and a hunk. I am attractive enough to make it, but I have a lot of room to grow, and I don't have room to get much less attractive. Like if I slump, there's not a lot of latitude for me in that direction. So I really need to get on my shit. And also it's a mental health thing, because exercise is very good for your mental health. And I have a lot of mental health issues, including with sleep, and just with the way my brain regulates the chemicals in it. So while I am trying to get stronger specifically so I can hopefully make more money on the internet, I also am excited to reap the benefits in terms of my mental health, because that's something that's not important to me, not only because it should be important to everybody, but also because mental health is a very big struggle of mine. Next thing I'm going to say is the male beauty standards thing is a crazy thing to say when women are held to infinitely higher beauty standards than men are. Are you fucking joking? Oh my God.
Way worse.
Women,
really hard.
Women are expected to be so much more conventionally attractive than we are. This is abstract and speculative, and I don't give a fuck, dude.
Okay.
A
Judge
woman,
Janine Pirro might be promoted to U.S. attorney. Look
a
at
woman
how she looks.
exactly as attractive as I am would be considered like a 1.5 down on a scale of 1 to 10 than I am. And men are very, very often rewarded for aging in a way that women are punished. And it's a damn shame. I personally think my most attractive days are ahead. And I'm excited for the FY Pod viewers to watch me become the twunkified Marvel version of me.
For the sake of presenting a less woke option, I'm going to say that blokes actually have it way harder. It's a very tough situation that we are in. I think Tim and I both understand it.
I was joking. I baited both of you. I baited Cameron into getting mad, and then I baited you into giving a very problematic anti-woke position.
No, I'm just joking.
We'll leave it there for Drew.
Sure
well, you could add. Maybe you could answer this question with a soliloquy about how men have it so tough.
The one reason I actually want to get like buff is I want to be able to box both Jackson Hinkle and Hassan Piker. Like eventually,
that Jackson Hinkle kid fucking sucks. And and let me tell you, I will send you creatine or HGH or whatever is necessary for you to beat his ass.
You know what he did, man? He made a fake AI porn image of my mum and posted it on his Twitter to like 2 million people. It was like fully disgusting. Like I want to.
You suck, Jackson Hinkle. You keep Drew's mom out of your mouth.
Let it be known, by the way, that whatever comments, and I don't align with everything Hassan Piker has said, whatever comments he's made that have been too inflammatory for all of you, Hassan Piker is not posting AI porn images of anybody's mom. So
he did. No, he did. I got to say though, he said it was funny when Jackson Hinkle did it. He was laughing on the live stream. I've had a couple run-ins with him. He was laughing on the live stream, and then somebody was like,
"Did you do anything about Hassan's mom? Did you insult Hassan's mom ever? Have you ever talked about Hassan's mom?"
Never. I did talk about his dad because his dad's a very wealthy guy from Turkey. But we go on.
Everybody, no pictures of anybody's mom. Okay, we're all better than that out here. Exactly. Drew, we honor your mother. Okay, Drew, Boomer mailbag. We have a segment where Boomers email us, and we had a lot of great questions from Boomers. But I liked this one the best from Ethan, a millennial. My brother is 29, so an elder Zoomer. He has no job, no kids, no girlfriend, living with our parents. He's lonely, disillusioned, addicted to Twitter, avoiding therapy, soaking in nihilism. Before the election, he asked for a conversation about the relative merits of Trump versus Kamala, calling himself a fence sitter. But when I sent him some mainstream sources, he lashed out, and we haven't talked since. My question is, how are we supposed to reach people like this to avoid letting them sink into nihilistic spiraling? Cameron, you first.
Two things. Number one, biggest red flag I see there is no therapy. Everybody who's struggling with something like that should be going to therapy if they are able to afford it. And there are a lot of resources that can help them get it if they can't. Worth noting that I do not consider it a red flag to not have kids when you're 29. I consider it a bigger red flag to have kids when you're 29. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. If you're at a point in your life where you're financially stable enough to do that, and that's the life choice that you're interested in making, I encourage you to take a while to make that choice and not jump into it. But I heard a lot of fucking red flags there. Not having a kid at 29 was not one of them. That's fine. I don't plan on having children when I'm 29, although if I do, I'll be an incredible father. Yeah. As for the mainstream media thing, I hate to do a little bit of a circle jerk here, but that's why I think publications like The Bulwark are so great, is that it's a lot of very positive values and outlooks, and some ones that I don't agree with, but I think it would be very hard for me to unilaterally agree with every single thing from an entire publication with a lot of different people who contribute. But publications like Bulwark and similar ones, independent media is very important right now, and I think that people like him would be an awful lot more receptive to media that is not owned by a giant conglomerate that's very often owned by a Trump-supporting billionaire anyway.
Drew, how do we reach incels?
Oh, dude, that's a really hard question, and I've struggled with that question as well. You know what's funny? Like, I think that a lot of young blokes literally get way more become way less radicalized when they actually settle down with a partner. Like, I know that
get laid.
Yeah.
Ethan, hold on. I'm going to interrupt here. Ethan, buy your brother some sex work. I'm just saying, I know, okay, we're just whispering that, but just like his little birthday present, I think that could help. Anyway, continue, Drew.
I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know if sex work is necessarily the right way because.
Okay. Well, you don't have to agree. That was just my advice.
No, I just I wouldn't want him to be like Taxi Driver, right? Like you know how Taxi Driver.
Well, I don't want to get him addicted. I just mean like a little one-off.
Fair enough.
And all the full paying full fare and all good, all chill.
It's hard. I think especially young men, they get like pretty radicalized when they're like, if they don't have economic opportunity and they don't have like good relationships in their life, like it is like really toxic. And I just know in my own case, right? Like when I like basically stopped doing my more risky protest stuff when like I got a girlfriend, I think people like you gotta really try to get this guy to avoid like just stewing in his room. You got to get him out into the world, meet new people, become friends with people, just get him socializing. Like I think that's a really big thing. I think people are just like shutting themselves off, becoming recluses, just getting mind poisoned from social media. It's really toxic. You got to try break that cycle. It's very dangerous. And I do agree with you on the whole media thing. It's hard. Like if you just send someone like a CNN source, they're not going to read it, especially young people. I think that's why you need like independent media. And like, that's the thing, right? Like we need independent sort of like alternative online media, but people who are not fascist and not communist filling that gap, right? And that's why I do like the Bulwark. I was very excited.
Send him Drew Pavlou.
Well, and the Bulwark.
Here you go, Ethan. You ready for this? The sex work idea? Let's just float that. But if not that, okay, you don't get mad at your brother over politics. I appreciate these guys' suggestion. You can send on the Bulwark. If he doesn't like my content or Cameron's or Drew's, that's fine, or anyone's. Go find your brother. Find something that he likes. Fly to see them. Take him out. Go to a fucking MMA fight. Go hug him. Go take him to an NBA game. And just don't talk about this shit. Don't get mad at him over politics. That is your brother. Just like connect with that person and bring him to something where there are going to be a lot of other people that he can socialize with. Maybe some women could be there. Invite him over. Fly him out. Get a plane ticket. Use your miles. That's what you should do, Ethan. Love
My
that
older
younger
brother is an assault rifle owning conservative, and I just sort of have this like, you know what? I don't care. You're not going to change my mind. I'm not going to change your mind. Let's talk about sports and the weather.
My parents love Trump. And I've just given up ever trying to have that discussion, right? Like we had years of political debates. You just have to first connect with people as your actual family members and your loved ones and your friends. Like that's the core thing. And that's why I like Tim's answer. Like the actual number one thing is like seeing people as human beings first.
Cameron, take us home.
I've got 2 takeaways from this episode. Number 1, shout out the Bulwark, man. I mean, hell yeah. We fucking rock. There's a great new article in some publication about how hard Tim is slaying right now. You should all go read it. Number 2, I think it is worth noting, as we've had this very enlightening conversation about communism, that despite the fact that Drew has seemingly dedicated a pretty tremendous amount of his life to being a huge public communism hater, if he ran on his moderate platform in the United States, people on the right and in the center left would call him a fucking communist. And with that, Drew, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. You have been amazing.
Well, you know what? My brother lives in America. I've sometimes had the really stupid thought bubble that maybe I should move to America, become a citizen, and in like 40 years, just like run.
Yeah, maybe not. Okay, thank you all for listening, and tune back in Monday night.